Good evening and welcome to Face to Face. For the Newsfirst team, I'm Niresh. My guest tonight is Professor G.L.Peiris, who of course needs no introduction to our viewers. Professor Peiris will be celebrating his 80th birthday shortly on the 13th of August. And we are looking back at his illustrious career which has spanned many decades. Good evening and welcome, Professor.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Professor, so many things to talk about in your career, and I don't know where to begin. So let's begin at the beginning with your schooling at St. Thomas College, Mount Lavinia.
Yes.
This is a school where you distinguished yourself, obviously, and you were quite a bilingual student, I gather.
Well, that was one of the characteristics of the education that was imparted to us at St. Thomas's College. This was during the time of Canon R.S. de Serum, who was succeeded by Mr. Davidson. It was very important to the college at that time to ensure that the products of the school were entirely bilingual. And there was an emphasis on effectiveness of communication skills. I remember much later when I was Cabinet's spokesman during the government of President Mahinda Rajapaksa, I had to, after every cabinet meeting, announce the cabinet decisions to the media. So I used to do it first in Sinhala and then in English. President Rajapaksa asked me on one occasion, I have been following what you say, and I was wondering how you managed to do this. You speak in Sinhala, then the exact content without any change whatsoever, nothing taken away and nothing added, is presented in the English medium. How is this possible? Because you don't use any notes at all. So I told him that is not my achievement, it is principally the achievement of the school where I received my education, because language in the eyes of the people who taught us was not just a way of communicating your thoughts in some way, just making yourself understood, but the quality, the elegance of communication was very important. And whatever you choose to do in later life, that is an advantage. And the other is that there was no stratification, no compartmentalization of students in terms of race or religion or anything like that. We would all belong to, let's say, the class to which we belong, say upper 4D or upper, no? There would be Sinhalese, Tamils, Muslims, Burghers, everybody together, right? And now those are the impressionable years. Certain prejudices and preconceptions that you form at that time cannot really be erased later on in life when attitudes have become fixed. So this again, we associated with people from different backgrounds, belonging to different cultures and so on. And that was conducive to the formation of a certain outlook, which, especially in the troubled times in which we live, is very healthy.
Absolutely. And from St. Thomas's College, you went on to the University of Colombo, I gather.
Yes.
And what is now the Faculty of Law. What was it like back then, the university?
Well, that was one of the happiest times of my life. I spent a very long period there. For 26 years, I was a teacher in the university system as head of department, as dean of the Faculty of Law, and finally as vice chancellor of the university. Now, the decision to go to the university for my undergraduate career was carefully made. At that time, there were exchange control restrictions, but my father was our country's ambassador in Germany. So I could have gone to Oxford and read for my first degree in law there. But many people advise me, if you plan to live and work in this country, it makes much more sense for you to do your first degree here and then to go abroad for postgraduate studies. Not only because you receive a training in your own legal system, but you establish contacts, with people with whom you would have dealings in later life in various capacities. So I was a student there. I had made up my mind not to go into the practice of law. That did not hold any real appeal for me. And the academic life was to me appealing and attractive. Now, as Vice Chancellor, I lived through one of the most difficult periods in the history of the university system in our country. As you would recall, my predecessor, the late Professor Stanley Vijayasundara, was shot dead in his own office. And the entire university system of the country, not only universities, but schools, hospitals, banks, everything closed down for a year and a half, something like that. And it took a long time to reopen our universities after that sustained period of disruption. Now, the main challenge during that time was to democratize the system. When I was a student in the Faculty of Law and undergraduate, there were just 17 students in our batch.
Oh, that's almost inconceivable when you think of today's numbers.
Inconceivable, because now you're talking of batches of 300, 400 and so on. Not only that, at the end of our first year in the Faculty of Law, we had to sit for a paper in Latin. Now, how many schools in our country teach Latin? So it was very much an elitist environment. Latin was important because some of the institutional writers on the Roman Dutch law, like Johannes Voet, wrote in Latin. So if you had familiarity with the Latin language, you could read those texts in the original. Now, the point I want to make is that in a system like that, it is not difficult to maintain the highest possible standards. You are dealing with a small group of students who have been exposed to the best possible, the highest quality education. It's not a system that can endure. It can't last very long, because you have to open the portals of the universities to students from different backgrounds, from rural backgrounds and so on. So as Vice Chancellor, I presided over a transformative change where very much larger students were admitted into the university system, let alone Latin. There was even a problem of being conversant with the English language. Now, the essential challenge was to admit those phenomenally large numbers without significant impairment of quality while preserving standards and not allowing the system to break down under the sheer weight of numbers. Tutorial classes. How can you have a tutorial class for 200 students? That's a misnomer. Tutorial would be 10 students, 15 students, right? Then the counseling systems, libraries, everything was subjected to intolerable strain because of the far larger numbers that were admitted within a very short period. So with the staff of the university, I had tremendous cooperation from my colleagues in the university, and that is what made my job so pleasant. We were able to confront that challenge successfully and to preserve standards. Today, I visit the Faculty of Law from time to time. Even next week there is an event there which I will be attending. And I'm very proud of the standards which the faculty continues to maintain. Every year they get students admitted to Oxford, Cambridge, Yale, Harvard and so on. They are certainly keeping the flag flying. So I'm very proud of the institution to which I devoted so much of my life. And that was, I would say, one of the most happy times that I spent.
Excellent. And of course, you won a Rhodes Scholarship in your younger days to do a PhD at Oxford.
Yes.
And you earned a second PhD, I believe, from the University of Colombo.
Yes. No, at that time there was a University of Sri Lanka.
Yes.
So my first doctorate from the University of Oxford I got that within a very short period of 2 years and 3 months. That was very unusual in the law faculty at Oxford University. Again, a tribute to my teachers in the university here, people like Professor Nadaraja, Dr. A.R.B. Amarasinghe, who became a judge of the Supreme Court, Professor C.F. Amarasinghe, Professor Mark Kure, Dr. Sorna Raja, and others. Yes, then my second PhD was from the University of Sri Lanka, as it then was, based on publications on the laws and the legal system of our country.
Excellent. And then, of course, your term as Vice Chancellor. But following that, in 1994, your decision to enter politics, it took many of us by surprise.
Yes.
I had first interviewed you in 1990
Yes.
for a newspaper,
Yeah.
and then in 1994 you announced that you would be joining the government of President Chandrika Kumaratunga, and it was quite a surprise. Tell us about the thought process behind that.
Well, Niresh, you were by no means the only person who was surprised. Many people were. But it's not something that happened overnight. It was not a decision arrived at suddenly or precipitately. I had been gradually inducted into the realm of active public policy formulation and implementation. It happened like this. When I was Vice Chancellor, I was invited by the late President Ranasinghe Premadasa to play a critical role in the Presidential Youth Commission. You see, he told me, I'm very eager to find out why this happened, not to wreak vengeance on anybody. There's no bitterness or acrimony, but we really need to ensure that there is no recurrence of this in the foreseeable future. How did this happen? It was an unmitigated calamity. And he appointed a presidential commission to probe the causes and so on. And that again was a fascinating assignment. I had the privilege of working with people like Professor Lakshman Jayatilaka, Dr. Radhika Kumaraswamy, Mr. Ralph Allis of D.S. Senanayaka fame. And the late president told us that this is the first report that is being submitted to him on time. Everybody else asked for extensions. We went all over the country, from Jaffna to Mathura, from Colombo to Batticaloa, talking to angry young people. Why did you do this? And the answers were very interesting indeed. And based on those, we prepared a report, aspects of which are still relevant to the contemporary situation. Right?
Very interesting.
Yeah. Then I was on the National Education Commission, mapping out education policy as Vice Chancellor. I was a member of the Council of Legal, many other things. No? Then Chandrika Kumaratunga, who was at that time, when I first got to know her, she was Chief Minister of the Western Province. And she was having certain issues, some of them of a technical nature, with the then governor of the province, Mr. Sharvananda. We began working on those issues. And after some time, after we had established a rapport, she told me, you have spent a very long period in academic life. You have reached the top. Your work has been published in the world's best known journals. Now, wouldn't you like to do something different? She told me, we are confident that we will be elected in 1994. But we want good people to run the government, and we would be delighted if you would join us. Shortly afterwards, I received a letter from her mother, the late Prime Minister Sirimavo Bandaranaike, inviting me to join her party. So after some consideration, I decided I would like to do this. I believe that in life, one should never be one. You must do different things. There must be diversity, right? So I accepted that invitation and came into politics. That was in the parliamentary election was in August 1994, and the presidential election was in November 1994.
Absolutely. And then, of course, you entered cabinet.
Yes.
Tell us what that was like.
My first portfolio was I was Minister of Justice, Constitutional Affairs, and External Trade, International Trade. At that time, the principal preoccupation of President Kumaratunga's government was, of course, a resolution of the ethnic issue. And her philosophy was very interesting. It was two-pronged. The war, in her mind, was not the ultimate solution. Military action was regrettably inevitable against a rump of the LTT, incorrigible, could not be won over, but she was quite convinced in her own mind that that was not the solution which was appropriate for the Tamil people. So she wanted to offer a viable political solution to the Tamil-speaking people of our country. This resulted in a very sustained effort, which culminated in the production of the most detailed constitutional instrument that has been devised in our country for a practical resolution of this problem. This was the Constitution Bill, which I presented on her behalf to Parliament on the 3rd of August in the year 2000. Even today, it remains the blueprint for a Sri Lankan state which responds to many of the needs and priorities of our people. Of course, a lot of water has flowed under the bridge. It needs to be modified in many ways, but it contains some seminal ideas which still continue to be relevant. So that took a lot of effort. Mr. Sarat Silva, who later became Chief Justice, was then Attorney General. He helped us a lot, as did Dr. G.L.Peiris, many others worked on this. So that was one of the priorities of our government at the time. Chandrika emerged as a national leader. So much enthusiasm. I mean, you would remember the euphoria in Jaffna, Chandrika bracelets, Chandrika bangles, and so on. There was so much euphoria, right? So
much expectation at the time.
Oh yes, there was. Right? So this was the matter which the government of President Kumaratunga addressed as its very first priority.
Now, you were also Minister of Ethnic Affairs and National Integration. So you were very much a part of the peace process, or trying to resolve the national issue. But it must have been so difficult in the backdrop of the war. There were very few who had faith in the LTT accepting any kind of peaceful solution, but you stuck to it. And then, of course, later on, you became the chief negotiator for the peace talks under, of course, the Ranil Wickremesinghe government. And you certainly put your heart and soul into that.
I did.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, you see, from the very beginning, it was obvious that this was not a problem that could be solved entirely by formal statutory provisions. You need those constitutional initiatives, but that cannot be the sole or even perhaps the most important part of the solution that is offered. Right? It was a heart and minds operation. You had to break down prejudices, assumptions, and so on. But throughout my life, I have been convinced from my university experience as well that this communalism has not seeped down to the grassroots. If you go to our universities today, young people do not think on those lines. He is Sinhala, I'm Tamil, he is Muslim. That is not there. There is a certain collegiate mindset and environment. So that is what gave me confidence throughout my career that this was not an insoluble problem. It can be solved given the right approaches, the right personalities, and the right attitudes at a given time. So a very important part of the proposed solution was the Sudu Nelu movement, with which the name of the late Mangala Samaravira is indelibly associated. right? That is to inculcate in people a sense of collective consciousness, that the things that unite us are far more significant than the things that divide us, right? And he did it with great passion. So he was handling that part of it, while the formal constitutional arrangements were a major part of my responsibility, as you said, as Minister of National Integration, Ethnic Affairs, and so on. When the war continued, there was a change of government. Ranil Wickremesinghe took over as Prime Minister, while Chandrika Kumaratunga continued as President. So it was a dual administration. What you said is absolutely right. The Sinhala people did not have much confidence in the LTT. There was a credibility deficit, and the problem was that the LTT leader Prabhakaran was absolutely convinced that he was militarily invincible, that he could not be defeated in the field of battle. He was absolutely convinced of it. Not only he, even as foreign minister, when I dealt with missions in this country, as you know, the larger missions are military attaches, and they all gave us consistently the advice that this is not a war which can be won. You may win a battle or a skirmish, but the war cannot be won. So ultimately there has to be a negotiated political settlement. Now Prabhakaran felt that there was no need to make any major concession, because at the end of the day he could not be militarily overcome. So this is why the LTT was very reluctant at every point to commit themselves to any definite position. We had meetings with them all over the world on 6 different occasions, right? But they would procrastinate, they would vacillate, they would not commit themselves to a definite solution. And it became evident to us as the talks went on that what they were really interested in what was called the ISGA, the Interim Self-Governing Authority. They are already established. Police force, customs, their own banking system, all of that they had done. Now they wanted de jure recognition for a situation which had already been established de facto, right? So they became more and more recalcitrant. The activities of the sea tigers, they challenged the Sri Lanka monitoring mission, which was the monitoring authority. And as it progressed, the Sinhala people more and more lost confidence in the process as a vehicle for delivery of any kind of equitable and satisfactory solution. So unfortunately, that is why it broke down. But also the external environment, 9/11 had a lot to do with it. After 9/11, it was difficult even to find a venue to host talks between the LTT and the government of Sri Lanka, because Western governments, after what happened on 9/11, regarded the LTT as a force that had to be absolutely rejected. No discussion, no compromise, no negotiation of any kind. So the entire international mood changed drastically after the events of 9/11.
Yes, certainly there was quite a hardening of the stance of Western governments at the time, because 9/11 shocked the world. So I suppose it was near impossible to talk peace successfully at the time. But when 9/11 happened, what was the LTT's attitude? Did they flinch at all?
No, when you look back on that entire sequence of events, we are conscious of a certain constancy in the LTT's attitude. See, the only person on that side who had any degree of understanding of the situation was the late Dr. Anton Balasingham. Balasingham was a political scientist. He was not a warrior. He was not a soldier. He saw it all coming. On one occasion, I asked him in a private conversation, look, Dr. Balasingham, this is almost like a Greek tragedy. We can foresee the outcome without much uncertainty. But there is still a window of opportunity. It is still possible to negotiate in good faith and to arrive at a mutually satisfactory solution. Why don't you make use of that window of opportunity? He told me, I have nothing to reproach myself with. I have tried very hard. I have done more than actually I should have done. But it is impossible for me to persuade my leader. My leader is persuaded by a hard coterie of people who are isolated from the reality of the world situation. Right? And he told me, if I try any harder, I may be placing my own life at risk. So they were isolated from the world, living in the jungles of the Vani. They had no understanding of the nuances of situations that were developing, especially after 9/11, when terrorism was something to be abjured, abhorred, and not to be accommodated in any shape or form. So those changes did not register in the mind of the LTT leader, and the course that he adopted was a course which had to end up as it did.
Absolutely. One could see that coming. We need to take a short break right now. I'm in conversation with Professor G.L.Peiris. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Speed, skill, adrenaline, the world's best riders. One global championship for the first time ever on Sri Lankan television. World Supercross 2026. Kickstart Friday at 9:45 p.m. Full race Saturday at 3 p.m. Highlights Sunday at 6 p.m. Only on TV1. TV1, the home of global sport.
කඩිනමින් ඔබේ ජංගම දුරකථනයට Newsfirst ඩයලොග් කෙටි පණිවිඩ සේවාව ෂණිකව සක්‍රිය කරගන්න QR කේතය ස්කෑන් කරන්න.
දිනුම් වැටීමෙන් වටිනා ජංගම දුරකථනයක් හෝ රූපවාහිනියක් දිනා ගන්න.
අපේ වැඩේට මෙයාව අවශ්‍යයි. ඒක නිසා අපේ වැඩේ සම්පූර්ණ වෙනකම් මෙයාව මේ ගෙදර තියාගන්න ඕනේ. මෙතනත් මට නාගයෙක් කියවක් හොඳටම දැනෙනවා.
Welcome back to Face to Face. I am with Professor G.L.Peiris and we are going down memory lane as he is about to celebrate his 80th birthday. Professor, so we spoke about the peace talks and your valiant but ultimately unsuccessful efforts to bring peace. And then, of course, you had a change in portfolios and you became Minister of Education and so on. What was it like changing to education, or back to education, I might say, because you had been the Vice Chancellor of the University of Colombo?
Yeah, that was a short tenure. That was under President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. And the main challenge at that time was to reduce the inequities and the inequalities in the education system, to introduce digitalization, modern methods, technology. There was a stream that had been introduced, technology. But that was a short stint as Minister of Education. But there were other issues also. I was Foreign Minister during that, just before that.
That's right.
First, under President Mahinda Rajapaksa for 5 years, and then I served as Foreign Minister also in the regime of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. And during those periods, the major challenges emanated from the Human Rights Council in Geneva. After the war ended in 2009, then I was Foreign Minister from 2010 to 2015. In 3 consecutive years, 2012, 13, 14, there were resolutions against Sri Lanka in the Human Rights Council in Geneva on the ground, very serious allegations of war crimes, genocide, and flagrant abuse of human rights and so on. But actually, see, the composition of the Human Rights Council is such. I mean, the countries of the European Union command about 14 seats there in a council of 47. And except on very rare occasions, they follow the same line when it comes to voting, because it is a delegated function to the bureaucracy in Brussels. Right? So, say, European countries that are members of the Human Rights Council, generally they tend to toe the same line. So, if they have made a decision to vote against you, there is very little prospect of winning the vote eventually. So, this was the major issue at that time, to resist foreign intervention in those situations. There are countries like China and Russia very strongly supported us on the basis they accepted that human rights was being made a tool for intervention in the domestic affairs of countries, and they were very much against it. Right? Sri Lanka was rich in our institutions, and we had the capability to deal with our own problems, and we had to be given the opportunity of evolving domestic solutions without having heavy-handed interference by foreign countries, which, I mean, history has shown that it doesn't really work. It doesn't really work. Countries have to evolve their own solutions to problems. And anything that is superimposed from outside is not likely over time to present you with a durable and lasting solution. So this was one of the great challenges at that time. Then of course I was also Minister of International Trade. So to ensure the competitiveness of Sri Lanka's exports, duty-free entry into the markets of Western Europe, free trade agreements. We have free trade agreements with India and Pakistan. So those were some of the challenges attaching to the portfolios which I was responsible for during that period.
Absolutely. Tell us about, going back to the peace process, tell us about the lessons learned from our Sri Lankan experience for the wider, the world at large. And this is especially relevant, I think, because right now in the Middle East we are, the world is grappling with a situation where there doesn't seem to be any common ground for discussion. And yet the military solution clearly is not viable either.
No.
So what can we in Sri Lanka perhaps impart into that process?
Well, there are some questions which are absolutely basic, which are not by any means confined to the Sri Lankan context. They have a far wider application. For instance, should you have a mediator or a facilitator at all?
That's a very interesting question.
Yeah. In a peace process, will you be better off the protagonists negotiating directly with each other, sitting like this, right? Sri Lanka government has a problem with the Tamil Tigers. Do you need a third party, or is it far better to talk candidly without any inhibitions or reservations between the two parties themselves? Now take South Africa. One of the most successful experiments with regard to solving problems of this kind, the transition from apartheid, Nelson Mandela and so on. The South Africans always insisted that there would be no foreign mediator or facilitator. Right? So many people offered. There was so much interest in getting involved, but they steadfastly and resolutely said no. The argument was, nobody has greater keenness or enthusiasm to resolve this problem than we ourselves. This is our problem. We need to resolve it. This is our country. We are going to live here. We are going to lay down our bones here eventually. And nobody has that degree of commitment in pursuing a solution. So they consistently rejected any kind of foreign mediation or facilitation. Now, President Kumaratunga began by adopting their attitude. She did not want. And as she began the process, soon after her election as president in November 1994, she carried out those talks directly, and her team was led at that time by Mr. Balapatagandhi, who was her secretary.
That's right.
Then people like my friend Rajan Asirwadan, at one time Bishop Kenneth Fernando of Colombo, Mr. Jayadev Oyangoda also played a role at one time, right?
Was Mr. Lionel Fernando also?
Lionel Fernando. Lionel Fernando was a member. So she sent this team. There was no foreign mediator or facilitator, right? But that did not prove successful. And then it was felt that maybe we need some third party, detached, disinterested, given the degree of distrust between the parties, right, to bring them together and set them off on some kind of potentially productive course, that a role of a facilitator may be useful. So that point of view prevailed. Then then if you decide you need a mediator, is something more than a facilitator. Mediator is using his own judgment. We didn't want that. We just wanted somebody facilitate, bring the parties together and help them to talk to each other. Then what kind of facilitator do you want? Now that again, maybe other countries can look with advantage, with profit at our experience. The decision was consciously made not to involve a very powerful country. Many people offered, the United Kingdom offered, Canada offered. But we decided on a smaller country with no significant geopolitical interest in South Asia. Norway was selected for many reasons. Of course, the well acknowledged expertise of Norway in these situations, and Norway was familiar with it. Not many people know that Norway was very actively involved in rural development, particularly in the southern part of the country, in Hambantota and so on. So they were familiar with the country. They had done a lot of good, which was appreciated by people here. So then we decided to invite Norway. So that's one question which may be of interest to peace processes outside Sri Lanka. Then there are other issues also. Must you necessarily have a ceasefire before embarking on a peace process?
It's a very interesting question indeed.
Yeah. At first, President Kumaratunga's attitude was, no, you don't start by laying down arms and having complete tranquility. That is not realistic. It doesn't work. The war will continue, but we'll talk. And as we make sufficient progress, and it is obvious to everybody that we are making headway, then the war will taper off. The violence will be reduced. But the total cessation of hostilities should not be a condition precedent to the commencement of a peace process. That was very much the stand of President Chandrika Kumaratunga. The LTT said nothing doing. We can't fight on one side and talk peace on the other. We see a fundamental contradiction in that. If we are talking peace, we want to do it wholeheartedly. And therefore, there must be a ceasefire. Right? Then after the change of government, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe accepted that position. He said, okay, we will accept a ceasefire and then pursue these talks in earnest. Then other issues also which are arising in peace processes the world over. Can the same party be the facilitator and the monitor? You see, in the Sri Lankan situation, Norway played both roles.
Yes.
They were the facilitator, but they were also the monitor, the Sri Lanka Monitoring Mission, which was the enforcing authority. Right? The enforcing authority was led by a Norwegian. Norway was responsible. And there were many situations in which there was this conflict of roles. So I could go on. And much of it is discussed in my book on the peace process. The things that went wrong, the things that could have been done better. And the other main thing, that's the final point I want to make with regard to lessons to be learned by others outside Sri Lanka from the Sri Lankan peace process. Communication is very, very important. There was a communication deficit. What was happening, what was being attempted was not sufficiently communicated to the people of the country. Because when this entire process began, there were about 90% of the people had faith in the process. They thought that a positive outcome was possible. Not only the Tamil people, but the Sinhala people, the Muslim people, everybody. By the time it ended, not more than about 15% of people had any hope at all that this was going anywhere. There were many reasons for that, but one of the reasons was an insufficiency of communication. People were not being taken sufficiently into our confidence, right? The media were not kept sufficiently informed. What was happening had a kind of elitist character away from the knowledge and the experience of the public at large. And that was one of the deficiencies of the Sri Lankan peace process, which people handling other peace processes could, with advantage, take into account.
Now, let's talk about electoral reform, Professor. And this is something that you worked very hard at, especially during the government of President Chandrika Kumaratunga. And it is something which all political parties in Sri Lanka have grappled with. And we have had several different systems of government. But everyone agrees that the current system is not suitable and everyone wants to change it, yet we continue on with it. What is your opinion on this? How do we set about changing it? What would be the best sort of solution? How do we arrive at this? Coming from the perspective of a person who spent a considerable amount of time on it.
See, the thing about Sri Lanka is that we have experimented with all electoral systems. This is why my predecessor, Professor Nadaraja, referred to our country as a legal museum. Almost everything is represented. Up until 1978, it started even before we got independence. The Donamo Constitution of 1931 gave us universal adult suffrage, right? So from 1931 through the Salisbury Constitution of 1948, right up to the Second Republican Constitution of 1978, we had the first past the post system. First past the post.
That's correct.
Now, then we became dissatisfied with that because it produced steamroller majorities, right? In 1970, Prime Minister Sirimao Bandaranaike, with the cooperation of the LSSP, the Communist Party and so on, she had a 2/3 majority. President Javadena in 1977 had a 5/6 majority. Now that was the one under the first past the post system. So you had parliaments dominated by one party, they developed authoritarian tendencies and so on. So we felt, no, this is not the best system, and we went in for, in the 1978 Constitution, we went in for proportional representation, which is the system we have today. Now, that system was supposed to produce more balanced parliaments. That is, the opposition, the party that loses, is not wiped out altogether, but it has a respectable presence in the legislative chamber. Now, we find that both systems have their flaws and drawbacks, right? With proportional representation, there are many problems with proportional representation. There isn't a direct nexus between the voter and the member of parliament, right? Now, at one time I was managing the Moratuwa electorate. There is no such person as a member of parliament for Moratuwa. So, if a resident in Moratuwa has a problem, a parochial problem, a child being admitted to school, or somebody finding a job, or an illness, or something like that, hospital admission, there is nobody to go to. This is my MP, this is my MP for Moratuwa. There is no such person. You have members of parliament representing the entire district of Colombo,
whom you may not know.
Whom you may not know. It also made it very difficult for, ordinary people to contest elections. You needed vast resources. Now, take an electorate like Dehiwala or Ratmalana, they were small electorates. So, with very limited means, if you were somebody who was very devoted to public service, you had the energy, the zeal, right, the capacity, you could offer yourself for election. You can't do it now. You can't contest Dehiwala, you have to contest the entire Colombo district. So, you have to spend 16 times the amount of money that you would have spent had you been contesting only Dehiwala. So, lots of flaws. Then, on the proportional representation system, if a member of parliament dies, you don't have a by-election. The next person on the list gets in. By-elections are very healthy, because then a government in power, when a by-election is held, realizes, we are losing popularity. So there is an opportunity for course correction.
Absolutely.
The opportunity for course correction. When I was in the advanced level at St. Thomas's College, there were 3 by-elections. And the then government, the government of Mr. Dudley Senaka, lost all 3. So then that is a signal to the government. You are not going the right way. People are not approving of what you are doing. Now, under this system, the government of the day, whichever government it is, does not have that opportunity. There are no by-elections, right? So what I am saying is, first past the post has its flaws. Proportional representation also has its flaws. What we need is a hybrid system, a combination of the two. We have that in New Zealand, we have that in Germany, we have that in various countries. A lot of work has been done. We have done comparative studies. There is no need to reinvent the wheel. We don't have to start this work all over again. Let us make use of the work that has already been done, and let us decide what is best for our country. We need to be selective, eclectic, decide what is best for us, drawing from different sources. But let us now think of implementation rather than more and more research and more work, which is now superfluous.
And we are almost out of time, but I'd like to ask you about the trust fund that you are setting up, which is from the royalties of your many books. And this is going towards the Law College to further research and academia.
Yes, not only the Law College. Now I have written a large number of books, about 11 or 12 books, and also collections of articles which I have published all over the world. In almost every continent, in every continent except South America, my work has been published in learned journals. We have put it all together, and I am establishing a trust fund, and the royalties which are payable to me as the author's share from all these books will be paid into that trust fund. And that money will be used for legal research and activity connected with the law in the Faculty of Law of the University of Colombo and the Sri Lanka Law College. And my proposal is that the trustees should be the Vice Chancellor of the University of Colombo, the Principal of the Law College, and the Dean of the Faculty of Law of the University of Colombo. So these are funds which I mean derived from my own effort, from my own work, that will be available for legal research and activity connected with the teaching of the law, memorial lectures, field work which is considered useful by the faculty or the law college. All of that, I think, will be a worthwhile contribution to legal education in our country.
A wonderful gesture indeed, and one which our academics will be very thankful. Professor Peiris, thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure having you once again. And thank you to you at home for watching. Don't go away because the news is coming up next. Have a great evening.
This weekend and every weekend, TV1 brings you the adrenaline of Aussie Rules football. For the very first time on Sri Lankan free-to-air television, feel the hits, the spectacular marks, and the roar of the crowd. Every weekend, catch AFL action exclusively on TV1 every Sunday at 9:45 p.m. Don't miss a moment, because every mark, every goal, every